And one of the visions we saw was Israel and the two olive trees and the lampstand and the bowl, which symbolized that it was going to be God incarnate, basically, Jesus Christ, as the two olive trees, feeding Israel as the light of the world in the millennial kingdom. And then we saw the vision of backing up a little bit, of the four carpenters that come and they stamp out Israel's enemies. So as we've moved through this, we've seen that God has a future, a plan for Israel. And the context of what's going on is they're in the rebuilding process of the temple. A remnant has come back from Babylon after the 70 years in captivity. And remember, Haggai comes first, and Haggai tells them, get up, get going. You guys are dwelling in your nice paneled houses, and you forgot about God's worship in the temple of God. And then God sends Zechariah the prophet, and he comes with a message of encouragement and comfort, saying, the reason why you need to do this is because God has a purpose, He has a plan, He has a future for you. And remember remember when that temple was finally finished, that some of the older generations, being probably in their 90s now, they remembered vaguely what the temple before that looked like, before it was destroyed from the Babylonians in the Babylonian captivity. And they said, this isn't what God's temple looked like. That's not even close to the glory of it. It doesn't even look it. There's no way. And then God basically rebukes that through Zechariah. And He says, no. That's just the start. God's temple and the worship of God and Israel being a light of the world starts there, but it stems all throughout eternity. God sees the end from the beginning, right? And now as we move forward, remember we talked about in chapter 5 the vision of the flying scroll. What was the flying scroll? The flying scroll was basically a symbol or a picture of divine judgment. And that's where we're going also in chapter 6, because all of history is moving toward its climax in the judgment of God's enemies. If Jesus Christ taught one thing, He taught that there's going to be a day of reckoning. There's going to be a day when God sits and He judges all nations, all people. And the vision of the flying scroll had to do with that as it flew through the whole world. Remember, the flying scroll was basically a parchment which symbolized this is God's written judgments upon the whole world and upon apostate Israel, right? But all nations moving toward that all history is moving toward that final judgment. All history is moving toward the one fact that Jesus Christ will judge all the nations. Right? The scriptures tell us, Acts chapter 17, that God wants everyone everywhere to repent, but that God, through that one man, Jesus Christ, will judge everyone. So what we get in chapter 6 now, it starts with this vision of the four chariots. Okay? Now what does this have to do with? Remember, as you read through the Old Testament scriptures, as you read through the prophets, it talks often about this final judgment that's coming. And we know when God's final judgment comes, when you do a little study of the Old Testament, it is upon the world when Jesus comes back. But more than that, the start of it is directed where? On Israel's enemies and the surrounding nations that surround Israel. That's where His anger, His primary focus on the nations that surround Israel and hate Israel. Now from there, when Christ returns, His judgment will roll from there to the whole world, right? But primary focus is on Israel and the nations surrounding Israel. And this is the vision that Zechariah is getting. Now why would this bring the Jews comfort at this time? Because Zechariah was the prophet of comfort. Why? Because they were in much persecution, much turmoil from the north, from basically for getting the work of God going again, for doing it. They were getting beat up about it. And I told you this before. When God starts a work in our life, it's not just easy rolling. It's not easy street. It's not a bowl of cherries. You're going to get opposition. People are going to come against you. And I used to think, oh God, you must not be in this because it's getting hard. It's getting difficult. Everyone's coming against me. You see, you can't be in this, Lord. It's the exact opposite. If things get difficult, right? and you basically want to give up sometimes, it's because you are doing the right thing. It's because you are moving forward with the Lord. It's, we have an adversary, the devil, that goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, the scriptures tell us, right? Now listen, I was talking to some of the leadership team. We're planning, in the near future, probably in the next few weeks, we'll roll something out, something that we're going to do with the land up the street with a new building. And I said, just watch. I said, in the next few months, the offerings will be lower. There'll be turmoil within the church. Things will happen because we're trying to move forward for the Lord Jesus Christ. It's just going to happen. And it's starting to happen. That's how I know we're in the center of God's will. The more that things get difficult, it's because we're trying to march on for Jesus Christ. We're trying to move forward for Jesus Christ. Now that was comforting for Israel for this reason. Because of all the persecution that they were under, they knew that there was an end to their enemies that were coming against God and God's people. Now this is the last of Zechariah's visions. He gets these visions in one night. And remember, as he got these visions, he would fade off and he'd kind of pass out because he was getting these heavenly visions, and he'd get nervous and he'd fade off and he couldn't take it all in. And then the interpreter angel would have to come and kind of wake him up and snap him out of it. Then he'd give him the next vision, and he'd be so filled up he really couldn't take in the heavenly visions, right? And the interpreter angel would come again that was standing in the presence of God and would have to wake him up again. Chapter 6. Now he turns, and it says, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came 4 chariots out from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of brass. In the first chariot were red horses, the second chariot, black horses, third chariot, white horses, fourth chariot, grizzled horses, and bay horses. And then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, what are these, my Lord? So he gets this vision from the interpreter angel, and again he's shocked and he has to ask for an interpretation. Now again, the context here has to do with the condemnation of God's enemies. And he gets this vision. He goes, I turned and I looked. He lifts up his eyes. He's like he's overwhelmed. He lifts up his eyes. He looks and he says, what? I looked, and behold, there came 4 chariots out from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of brass. So we have chariots, we have mountains, and they're mountains of brass. Now, the chariots you're going to see as he interprets this for him in verses 5 through 7 have to do with the angels and the angelic hosts. Okay? The horses have to do with divine judgment. Remember, Revelation chapter 6 talks about basically the same thing. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Same colors, right? Red, black, white, pale, or grizzled. All right? Now listen. The chariots have to do with divine judgment. And what he's getting here, it says they're between 2 mountains. Now, what mountains are these? Now, scholars have studied this throughout history, and the consensus seems to say that what's going on here, it's Mount Zion, right? And it's the Mount of Olives. Now, what's Mount Zion? When people say, what's Zion? Zion, Zion. It's basically Jerusalem. It's the Temple Mount where you see basically today Islam has control of the Dome of the Rock, okay? And that's why the Jews that come to pray there, they can't go up to the site. There's a wall behind it, and what's that called? The Wailing Wall, right? That's where they have to pray, because they can't go on top of the mount where the sacrifices took place on the Temple Mount. That's Zion, all right? Now, across the way, not too far, is the Mount of Olives, right, where Jesus ascended into heaven. The Olivet Discourse about his second coming. Now, in the middle of that, there was a valley, right? A little valley and a little brook. It was called Kidron. All right? The Kidron Valley. Remember, Jesus at the Last Supper. He has the Last Supper with his disciples. Then he goes out and he crosses over the Kidron Valley. Remember the Kidron Brook in that valley. And it wasn't this giant valley. It was like a brook. And remember, what was going on is the Passover lambs were already being sacrificed. And as the blood sprinkled down from the temple precincts, into Kidron, into the brook. Jesus is with his disciples, basically telling them, do you see this? As the blood ran into Kidron and the water got murky. Basically showing them that I'm your Passover lamb. All those lambs that are being slain are picturing me, right? So you have these chariots, which are symbols of angels and what they're going to do, right? And then you have these two mountains, probably Zion and the Mount of Olives. And it says the mountains were mountains of brass. Brass in the scriptures is always a symbol of what? Divine judgment. Remember Revelation, you see a vision of Jesus Christ. It says his feet were of brass. Revelation is the unveiling, the apocalypse of Jesus Christ, finally, when he judges the world, right? Now you have all this going on here, and it's interesting. What's probably going on here, what he's probably seeing is this. When Jesus Christ comes back, he steps down on the Mount of Olives. Why don't we read that? Go to Zechariah 14. A few more pages. Zechariah 14. Look in verse 1. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, and your spoil shall be divided in the midst of you. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. And half of the city, listen, shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west, and there shall be a very, where it is, great valley. And half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half toward the south. So what's going on here? I think Zechariah is getting the same vision in chapter 6 as you see in chapter 14. When Christ comes back, he steps down on the Mount of Olives, right? Now the Mount of Olives is rent in two. Now the Kidron Valley, instead of becoming a little valley and a little brook, is massive. And it's opened up. All right? And judgment has already started to take place. And then more judgment of all the nations will take place when he comes back. Now it's interesting. Joel gives us the same picture. Go to Joel, back a few books. All right? Right before Amos, Joel. Here it is again. I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, what's the valley of Jehoshaphat? There is no valley of Jehoshaphat. There's no valley of Jehoshaphat. What Joel's telling us here, Jehoshaphat means God judges. I'll bring him into the valley of my judgment, is what he's saying. And will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. Now, what's going on here? Go back to Zechariah chapter 6. Zechariah is getting a vision of these chariots rolling with the horsemen that have already rolled through there, rolling from the Mount of Olives through Kidron, all through Jerusalem, and eventually through the world. It's a symbol of God's judgment. And it encompasses its finality right there between the Mount of Olives and Mount Zion. So these chariots roll. Chariots are what? They were used for warfare, right? Warfare, right? Horses were used for warfare. Now what God is saying is, I'm going to go and fight for my people. And the way he does this is he dispatches his heavenly beings, the angels, all right? As they roll like chariots against the enemies of Israel, right? In Kidron, in that valley of Jehoshaphat, Jehovah judges, and basically God comes against, he stands and he fights against his enemies. That's what Zechariah is seeing here. Now, let's look at the horses. In the first chariot were red horses. In the second chariot, black horses. In the third chariot, white horses. In the fourth chariot, listen, grizzled or bay horses. Then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, what are these, my Lord? What am I seeing? Now, why the number 4? 4 chariots, 4 horses. I did a little study. 4 is the number of universality. Meaning that even though God's judgment is starting with the nations around Israel, it rolls as you move forward, in verse 7 especially, through the whole earth. It starts with Israel and Israel's enemies, but it overflows in judgment to the whole earth. Like the 4 winds of heaven covers the whole earth. 4 is the number of universality. That God's going to judge the whole world, starting with Israel's enemies. Now stay with me. It gets interesting. We see the same thing, right? Go to Revelation. Revelation chapter 6. We see Jesus. He starts to unloose the seals, and the seals' judgments start to open up on the earth, right? We see the same 4 horsemen ride as God's judgment is thrown down. What? Not only on Israel and Israel's enemies, but through the whole earth. And you see just exactly what the black horse, red horse, pale horse, white horse symbolize when God's judgment hits the earth. Verse 1. And I saw when the Lamb, that's Jesus, opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, come and see. Jesus is taking back the earth at this time, right? He's unloosing the seals of the scroll, chapter 5, which are the title deed to the earth. And he's taking back the earth at this time. Now, as he takes back the earth, he looses one of the seals, right? One of the 4 beasts, that's one of the angels, says, come and see what's going to happen. And I saw and behold a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Scholars have said through history that that's the Antichrist. Jesus says when he opens the seal, you guys want this kind of ruler? You can have him. God's using the Antichrist to judge his people and some of the world. Why does he do that? I don't know. But I know as you read through the Old Testament, he would often use ungodlier nations to judge his nation and his people, Israel. He's an instrument of judgment. So, the white horse rides. Verse 3. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast, that's another angel, saying, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. So that's what? Military power, battle, warfare, as that next horse, that red horse, rides. Bloodshed. Verse 5. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see, you hurt not the oil and the wine. So when this last apocalypse starts to happen, and these 4 horsemen ride, what happens after war? Famine. It's seen as God's judgment. Zechariah is seeing the same thing. But Zechariah's vision's more directed on Israel and the surrounding enemies of Israel. But then it broadens to the whole world. That's what you're getting in Revelation. Verse 7. And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. His name that sat on him followed was Death. And hell followed with him. And power was given unto him over the 4th part of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, with the beasts of the earth. So all in this last horse, you have warfare, you have hunger, all of it encompassed into one as God's judgment falls on the earth. Go back to Zechariah chapter 6. Now, the Holy Spirit gave us the scriptures. Obviously, Scripture is going to interpret Scripture. Zechariah is seeing the same thing that John saw. John sees it more in a broader perspective, though. Go back. Again, the condemnation of God's enemies. You saw the symbols, right? The chariot, the black horses, right? The mountains, what they symbolize. Now look at the significance of them. So he asks in verse 4, "Then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, What am I looking at? What are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said unto me, These are the 4 spirits," and there's the number 4 again, "of the heavens which go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth." Spirits, there's the Hebrew word ruach, which means wind, right? Angels are spirits. And where do angels stand? It says, standing before the Lord of all the earth. Remember when you see Gabriel in the Gospels, in Luke's Gospel? He says, "I'm Gabriel who stands in the presence of God." Remember in Daniel's vision? Daniel says, "I looked and I saw multitudes, myriads upon myriads, standing in the presence of God." So obviously, in this last judgment, what's going on here is these angels are dispatched to start God's judgment. This is what Zechariah is seeing. And they stand right in the presence of God, and look what it says. The black horses, now he narrows it down. By the way, the word Lord of all the earth, it's a millennial title that says this is the time when Jesus finally is going to be the Lord of all the earth, the way God had planned. Verse 6. The black horses, which are therein, go forth into the north country, and the white go forth after them, and the grizzled go forth toward the south country. Now, why is it narrowed down like this? Basically, you see the north country and the south country. This is God's judgment upon Israel's primary enemies in the last days. You can't come from the west because there was a sea there, right? Right? The east was a massive way to travel. All of Israel's enemies came either from the north or from the south. Remember all through the Old Testament, they came from the north. You have the Seleucid dynasty that come bouncing down, Antiochus Epiphanes, all of that stuff, which is a picture and a type, Daniel 11, of the Antichrist. Then, who are Israel's enemies to the south? Egypt, the Ptolemies, right? And he's seeing here, in the last days, it's going to be the same thing. When God gathers all these nations to battle against Israel, they come down from the north, they come up from the south, Egypt, the areas of Turkey, and they're converging on Israel. And God said, I'm going to send my judgment, my chariots, my angels, and my horsemen, basically, to go fight against them. That's what Zechariah is seeing, the protection of God's people. Now watch. And the bay went forth and sought to go that they might walk. Now listen to this. These are the other horses, the bay or grizzled horses. And the bay went forth and sought to go that they might walk to and fro through the earth. And he said, get you hence, walk to and fro through the earth. So they walked to and fro through the earth. So again, the judgment starts on Israel's immediate enemies. Horsemen go to the north and to the south, but the bay horses go throughout the whole world. When Christ comes, the whole world will be judged. Remember he says in Matthew 24:25, I will send forth my angels, right, to gather forth the elect for that last and final judgment. The elect are basically taken to safety. You have the judgment of the sheep and the goats, and the angels take everybody else to that final judgment. Those are the bay horses and the chariots that are riding. Now, watch this. Now, this is interesting. Remember, verses in chapter 6 and 1, 2, 3, we see the symbols of the judgment, which are the chariots, right? The mountains, the brass, the horses. You see the importance and the significance of the judgment, right? In verses 5 through 7. When he says, what are these? He interprets it for them. And then look at God's satisfaction in verse 8. Then cried he upon me, and spake unto me, saying, behold, these go toward the north country, have quieted my spirit in the north country. Now this is interesting. Why is God's Spirit quieted in the north country? Now stay with me. Where does Antichrist come from? The king of the north, right? Comes to invade and destroy God's people. Why is God's Spirit quieted when the north country is judged? Because all of their primary enemies came from the north. The Babylonians came from the north. The Assyrians came from the north. Antichrist comes from the north. And God says, I've been pent up with all this anger against the enemies of my people. That's what he's saying. The Bible, if you didn't know that God's angry, I just want to tell you that. He's angry at sin. He hates it. And he stands up to fight for his people. All right? It's not our job to take vengeance. The Bible says, vengeance is mine, God says. I will repay. God wants everybody to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. But if they don't, they're testing his hand. And basically, when the nations are judged, when you read Matthew 24:25, how are they judged? They're judged on the account and how they treated God's people, Israel, right? All the way back to Abraham. I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. Now, this is interesting. God says, my spirit is quieted. I quieted my spirit in the north country. When judgment comes upon the nations that invade Israel from the north, God says, basically, I'm appeased. Because finally, my vengeance is being meted out on the enemies of my people. All right, moving on. Kind of switches gears here. Look in verse 9. We saw the condemnation of God's enemies. Now look at, now there's a king, the coronation of the king. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, now the visions are over, all right? The visions have ended. All these visions that he gets in one night, the visions are over. Now he gets the word of the Lord. And the word of the Lord came unto me, no interpreter angel there. Take of them, now this is interesting. Who are these guys? Take of them, of the captivity, even of Heldai, all right? Who's this guy? Of Tobiah, of Jedediah, which are come from Babylon, and come thou the same day, and go into the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah. Now these guys, I did a little study of their names. All their names have to do with godliness. One means God is strong. One means God knows. One means that God supports. What's going on here? These guys that Zechariah is getting a picture of here, they're latecomers coming from Babylon. Remember, the first initial people came out to start this rebuilding process years before. Now these guys are latecomers coming back to help Zerubbabel in the rebuilding of the temple. That's who these guys are. So the vision is done now. Now it switches gears back to the word of the Lord and what's going on in Zechariah's time. Right? Zechariah just got all this vision of the future, of the end, of Israel being restored, light of the world again, God's judgment on all his enemies, and then he gets, it goes right back to what? What's going on at that day and that time. Now stay with me. These guys are latecomers from Babylon. And what are they coming with? They come into the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah, then take silver and gold, make crowns, set them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. So they come back with these jewels, silver and gold, to help in the rebuilding of the temple. He switches gears a little bit here. And now why does God tell Zechariah to do this? He says, take these jewels, take this gold, this silver, and make some crowns. Okay? And literally, in the Hebrew, it's crowns, plural, but it's really singular. It says crowns because you have these different metals. And basically, he says, mold them together, the silver, the gold, and mold together one crown. One crown. And what do they do with the crown? Take the crown and set it, verse 11, upon the head of Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. Again, Joshua was the high priest at that time. Now, this is very interesting. A lot of theology here. When was a priest ever crowned in the Old Testament? Never. Priests don't get crowned, right? They don't do that. Remember, who was the king? I think his name was Uzziah. He decided, he was a king at one point, that he wanted to take on the priestly duties, and God severely judged him for it. Okay? You never had that. Remember the constant battles in Israel between the king and the high priest? But now God says, take these jewels, mold together this crown, and place it on the high priest. Interesting. Because what we have here is a picture and a symbol that's not about Joshua, it's about Jesus Christ. Now listen to me. Stay with me here. I know this is difficult stuff. Try to think through this with me. It's very important. Jesus is called our great high priest, right? And he's also called the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jesus is what? A high priest forever after the order of, Bible scholars, Melchizedek, right? Who was Melchizedek? He appears out of nowhere in the book of Genesis, right? Abraham just gets through a battle. He comes and he pays tithes to Melchizedek. Melchizedek is called the priest and the king of Salem, Jerusalem, right? City of peace. And then Hebrews kind of comments on this guy Melchizedek. They're like, he had no father, no mother. He just appears out of nowhere because he's a picture of our great high priest and our King of Kings, Jesus Christ. So when he says, take this crown, place it on Joshua, the high priest, they're wondering, wait a minute, priests don't get crowned. That's a whole separate office. Like David was the king. Jesus comes from the loins of David, right? The priesthood, right? Jesus' priesthood doesn't go back to Aaron. It goes back to before Aaron, greater than Aaron, Melchizedek, the high priest. There's a lot to think through here. But the significance of what we're seeing here is God says, after the nations are judged. Stay with me. Verses 1 through 8. After the nations are judged, there's going to be the coronation of a king. And that king is not only a king, he is a great high priest. He's the go-between. That was a priest office, right? The priest office was to be a go-between for God and God's people. But now we don't need any earthly priest anymore because we have the God-man, Jesus Christ, who is our high priest. We can go right to God through Jesus Christ, right? So the coronation of Joshua is really the coronation of Jesus Christ. Look into the future after Israel's enemies are judged. Now watch. Verse 12. And speak unto him. Now this is interesting. Speak unto him. Speaking prophetically, not just about Joshua, about the King of Kings and the great high priest that's crowned. Speak unto him, saying, thus speaks the Lord of hosts, saying, behold the man. Who else said, behold the man? Pontius Pilate. Speaking prophetically. Didn't even know he was saying it. That the man that was standing in front of him was none other than the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and the great high priest for all of God's people. Right? But he was a man. He came as a man. Now watch what this man does. Behold the man whose name, we talked about this before, whose name is the branch. Literally. Not just a branch, but a sprout. A root. Like Isaiah 53. He's a sprout. He grows up. Now watch what this branch guy does. This King of Kings, this priest. Watch what he does. It's interesting. He does 8 things. And he shall, listen, he shall grow up out of his place. What does that mean? That means he's going to grow up from amongst his people Israel. Just like anybody else. He's going to grow up from amongst his place. Now listen, the Bible says he was just going to be a normal guy. He had no form or comeliness, and anybody's going to desire him. He didn't come rolling in on a red carpet. or flying out of heaven with wings. All right? He grew up. He was born of a lowly couple, virgin birth Mary, right? And he'll grow up out of his place, out from Israel, his people. And the Bible says he grows in wisdom and stature in favor with God and man. He grew up just like any other child. Now watch what he does. He'll grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Even he shall build the temple of the Lord. Why was that significant to Zechariah? What are they trying to build? The temple, right? The glory of it wasn't as beautiful as Solomon's temple. But I'm going to tell you something. The temple that Jesus builds, read Ezekiel's temple. Read about it. In the millennial kingdom, he rebuilds the temple. He sits on his throne. And this is what all of Israel have been waiting for since Abraham was finally a Messiah reigning from Solomon's temple. A greater temple will be rebuilt because Jesus will be ruling from there. Now listen to me. Now he's just a sprout, a branch who grows up. Humility. But look at the great things he does for his people. Now watch what else he does. And he shall bear the glory. It says he is glorified in that time. And listen to me, all these wacko cults out there that say, well, the Bible doesn't say that Jesus is God anywhere. Well, wait a minute. God says what? I will not, I'm God alone. I will not share my glory with another. But Jesus bears the glory. He shall bear the glory. Now watch. We don't have time to go through in detail through all these. If you want to study it for extra credit, go ahead. You'll get a star next week. All right. And he shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne. Here it is again. He's king and priest on the throne. That was unheard of. In Israel's time, there were separate offices. But when the branch comes, the sprout, right? He's king and he's priest. Again. Next thing he does. In the council of peace shall be between them both. No more battles between the king and the priest. They're going to be one in that day. Look at what he does next. And the crowns shall be to Halem, to Tobiah, and to Jedediah, and to Hen. These are the guys that came back, right? And Zephaniah for a memorial in the temple of the Lord. I'll get back to that in 1 second. And they that are what? What else does he do? They that are afar off shall come and build in the temple of the Lord. Who are those that are afar off? Paul talks about this in Ephesians. You who were afar off are now brought nigh through the blood of Jesus Christ. That's not just for the Jews. It's all people. All the Gentiles get to come to this millennial temple. Everybody. Right? Now watch. What else does he do? They that are afar off shall come, build in the temple of the Lord, and ye shall know, listen to this, that the Lord of hosts had sent me unto you. Listen, what else does he do? When he comes back, there's no question of the accuracy of God's word prophetically. He says, you shall know, listen, you shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me. He fulfills all the scriptures, all the prophecies. What else does he do? Last but not least. And this shall come to pass, listen, if you will diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. Listen, participation in that kingdom depends on obedience. Today's the day of salvation. You want to participate in that kingdom? You got to receive the Lord Jesus Christ, right? You walk with the Lord, and you will be part of that kingdom one day. When he rules and reigns from earth, this is what he does. And we're part of that because we've obeyed the voice of the Lord. Now listen to me. Last but not least, look at the last thing I want to see in verse 14 is the shrine. And the crowns, remember, it was one crown. It says crowns because there's a bunch of metals that are made up of this one crown. Shall be to Halem, to Tobiah, and to Jedediah, and to Hen, the son of Zephaniah, for a memorial in the temple of the Lord. Now, this is interesting. Let me tell you what's going on here. God says to Zechariah, let that crown that they make from these guys that come back from Babylon, let them make this crown. And tradition tells us that in Zerubbabel's temple, there was a window high up in the temple for everybody to see. And you know what they hung in that window? They hung this crown. And that crown was a symbol of when the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and the great high priest comes back, that crown is enshrined. That shrine that they had is put, that crown is put upon his head. That's what's going on here. It's a memorial to point forward to the future when Christ is enthroned in Zion.